Greetings, dear friends. I'm glad to introduce the participants of today's conversation to you. This is the respected Igor Mikhailovich Danilov,
Greetings.
Zhanna,
Greetings.
Diana,
Greetings.
and Andrei.
Greetings.
Many of you have heard the following assertions: that thought is material, or be afraid of bad thoughts, or do not do what you should not do, even in your thoughts. A lot of scientists at different times in different countries of the world also ask themselves questions of what our thoughts are, whether they are material after all. Opinions were divided. Some people said that thought was material, while others said that thought was ideal. And today we would like to dot all the I's in this regard. I will start our program with the works and research of the scientist, psychiatrist Gennadiy Pavlovich Krokhalev, who was able to experimentally photograph visual hallucinations. Gennadiy Pavlovich was exactly one of the first to show the visual images and visual information not only come to us from the outside world, but we can also transmit them to the outside world. And not just transmit, but this can also be recorded on photographic materials. It all started in 1972 when his brother brought him Technique for Youth magazine, where they saw an article by Valery Skorlatov, who was the Moscow physicist back then. The article was titled "See the Other Way Around." In this article, it was precisely assumed that this hypothesis was put forward. Yes, the visual images and visual hallucinations can really be photographed. And what is interesting is that much earlier, in 1880, the artist, French photographer Pierre Boucher, just accidentally took pictures of visual images. What happened? Once, after a noisy party, he woke up in the morning to go to the lab and develop photos. And he couldn't basically find this photo for a very long time. He couldn't concentrate on his work because he was hounded by both noise in his head, let's put it so, and images from his nightmares. And at the moment he developed the first photo, he saw not a photo of the client, but precisely pictures of the images that bothered him all night long, and as a matter of fact, images from his nightmares. Of course, since then, since 1880, till the time of experiments and tests by Gennadiy Krokhalev, was quite a long period. And of course, our operators also became interested in the tests, experiments, and work by the scientists, Permian psychiatrists, and they wanted to repeat these experiments because this is really the actual evidence of the fact that thought is material after all. And what's most important in that, all these voices in the head, visual images, and hallucinations are of exogenous, that is, of an external origin, that there is a certain field, a subtle material environment, which very aggressively affects a person and aggressively treats a person. Therefore, we would probably ask Andrei to expand on the experiments now, because he was a member of this experimental group.
Yes, we've also familiarized ourselves with the materials which are, in principle, freely available on the internet. This is about the works by Gennadiy Krokhalev. We also read a little bit about the history of, let's say, mystical photography. I mean, they were involved in this at the end of the 19th century, and famous Nikola Tesla once also said that eyes can not only receive, but also transmit something into space.
Transmit.
Already during the work of Gennadiy Krokhalev, many scientists have also come to the conclusion that an eye can work as a photodiode, on the principle of a photodiode. That is, when light falls, current passes through it, and they assumed that it may be this way. If a potential is applied, then radiation may go outside. We've become very interested in it. In his works, Gennadiy Krokhalev used ordinary films with a different light sensitivity, starting from 100 to 500 units. Well, nowadays, we even used films with a sensitivity of 30 to 100. That is, technological progress has advanced far in this regard. And, let's say, the spectrum of photographic material that can be used for this experiment has expanded significantly. Well, it is clear that the easiest way today would be to use digital technology. For instance, all of us use it now. We shoot our programs with it. Yes, and it would seem that it is the easiest way, and the spectrum of coverage in the digital device is much higher than in the analog one. We have an opportunity to use different equipment. Now we are shooting, well, how many manufacturers of cameras do we have? For instance, we use different lenses, but there were no results at all on a digital device. Then we found cameras, let's say the ones produced 20 and 30 years ago.
30 years ago.
Of course, we used an enormous number of films. In this case, we can't even say, meaning a very large number and of different light sensitivity. We used more than 5 different film cameras, Zenit 11, Zenit E, well, and of the same kind.
Old production cameras.
Yes, it's still the old one, also.
But basically Krokhalev also used Zenit and, in principle...
Yes.
My friends, I know a little bit about this. I'm saying it right away that I didn't take part in these experiments, but I heard how they did it. What did you start with?
We started with dividing the experiment into 3 main stages. The first stage is photographing consistent images. What does it consist of? For example, if you turn on a bright light in darkness, in total darkness, well, or it's a flash, let's say, or a bright light bulb, and turn it off, then every person can notice a kind of residual light effect in his eyes.
Light effect.
And it gradually goes away. That is,
abrupt excitation occurs, and it remains.
Yes, and if we, let's say, make several, for instance, when we work with the consistent images, but if we make several camera flashes, it can be 3, 4, 5 of them, then it is possible to find a certain interval, that in person's eyes there remains an image of the whole room where he is with all the elements. I mean, there is no light anymore, but the whole image of the room is in his eyes, meaning it's like 3D. This is such an interesting moment, in fact. Well, it's so...
Was it captured on the film?
Yes. At first, we used a camera. We took close pictures. Then we tried to find a focal length at which we could catch it. Then we reread the works once again. And it was written that they were photographed, that the most of the photos were taken precisely from the retina. Also, they used just films, without any equipment. So what did it look like? Let's assume that there is a flash. A person fixes an image. But what's important is that a person doesn't move his eyes, because as soon as he starts doing something with his eyes, the image immediately disappears. It means that it is necessary to concentrate a little on one point, and then they just took the film and put it to the eyes, like this. That is, like projection. We had another method afterwards. It's when we asked people to project their images. I mean, it was like Gennadiy Krokhalev did. He, let's say, used in his works people with overly intrusive images.
Well, he worked with mentally ill people, with those to whom these images came. In fact, they were imposed. And when they became reality for patients, that kind of reality he was photographing.
Yes. We also photograph people from, let's say, from those, well, who also observe obsessive images in themselves. Meaning, these people are perfectly healthy, normal, reasonable, but they observe the presence of these images in their consciousness. We also tried to fix this as an experiment. We also, well, it was interesting for us too. We recreated Krokhalev's mask. We also used leather fur from the camera of the 30s of the 20th century. In the same way, we found it, yes, it was interesting too. Well, in fact, it is interesting, because these pictures of thoughts images can be taken in an entirely bright room. That means there is no need in creating special conditions for everything to be dark there, and like we...
Well, he did it because he worked with mentally ill people. And it was extremely difficult to lock them in a dark room to photograph a hallucination. They would have had panic, attacks and everything else. So he developed this mask not to aggravate their condition. He could freely control this in a ward in the daytime or with the light. Well, I think that it was nothing but a darkening. This was the main goal.
Yes.
It didn't serve as a concentrator or anything else.
No, absolutely not. We also experimented with this mask. Indeed, its main advantage is that it gives a good darkening. We also used photographic paper. This projection too. But it required longer exposure time. Well, we simply needed more time to project on it. There is another one. Another method of photographing that we used was to ask a person to keep and project some simple figure or a number. That is, we got out and printed white figures on paper sheets with numbers on a black background. Well, we asked the guys, the ones who, let's say, can keep such figures well, to train for some time. And then we also asked them to project these images on a digital camera and on a film camera, on film and on photographic paper.
Well, by to project this, you mean to visualize this, right?
To visualize.
To visualize in space and take pictures at the same time.
Yes.
Did you succeed in it?
No, we didn't succeed much. Let's put it so, we had already tried different films by then. These were digital negative, positive films. We even took slides. I mean, it was a film on which the image was displayed as it was, and could be used as in film strips. Well, Krokhalev mentioned that it also worked on such a film. Well, we also used infrared films, because it was also pointed out in his works. Well, as scientists assumed that a glow from the eyes can be infrared, of the infrared range. Well, there was no result either. For about 2 weeks, we
were engaged in the experiment.
Experimented, yes. Of course, it was very interesting, because, let's say...
That's why, guys, I didn't participate. I grudge spending a lot of time.
There were comic situations as well. As soon as we were going to take pictures of those people who were haunted by obsessive images, then all the images, thoughts, everything, actually everything disappeared. And well, we may say it is such a therapeutic effect, if anyone wants to. We also asked some of our participants if they wanted us to take pictures of their thoughts. They said, no, thank you, no, we don't want to, so...
I wonder what they were thinking about.
Yes.
That they did not want.
And then, in the process of, say, going over various options, we came to such an understanding that Gennadiy Pavlovich actually took pictures of, well, as he wrote in his works, of imposed images, meaning of exogenous ones. Yes, as we have already mentioned today, of the ones that come from outside. So, basically, those people with whom he worked with were the people who received them, while we were constantly photographing people who tried to create them.
So you took pictures of the people who tried to visualize them, meaning who created this image, while he photographed the ones who relayed them, meaning they weren't even relays. They perceived this image as real. Well, I think we'll approach this now, an interesting topic. Well.
Yes, and as a matter of fact, that's what made us think that we should try to recreate the same experimental conditions as Krokhalev had. That is, we understood that we need an operator, I mean, a person who will transmit an image to another person and to photograph not the operator, but the one who is transmitting, but the person to whom he is transmitting it. We took a trained operator. We took the person who already had experience in this. Yes. We invited Yulia, whom you could see in the pyramid experiment with numbers transmission. And we started this experiment. And in this experiment, by the way, it was held in our basement at the coordination center. In this experiment, we exactly used Krokhalev's mask, because, well, we wanted, let's put it so, conditions to be good. darkness to be there. But we, let's say, wanted this to be done easily. And that is when we could use the Krokhalev's mask. And so, as a matter of fact, well, this is already, let's say, after 2 weeks of different experiments, we've got something interesting. And here are the results. Let's say, the results. So we asked the operator. The experiment consisted of, let's say, 5 steps. We asked the operator to transmit the numbers 1, 2, 3, triangle, and a circle, in turn to 5 people. The operator regulated the time herself, meaning it was this way. She tuned into the person, transmitted image, and when he gave the go-ahead, we opened a diaphragm of the camera and projected, well, and took pictures of the person's eyes. When the operator said stop, well, it was about, as for the timing, it was between 1 and 3 minutes, so...
Well, depending on how the operator was tuning in.
Right, and the results are interesting. Let's say, I'll show them to you right now. This is the number 1, which was fixed. Also, well, the numbers 2, 3, which were also projected, transmitted. We are still proceeding with the materials, getting them developed. Well, this is a circle. I mean, there was a symbol of a circle. Yes, of course it.
Well, we can say it's a speck, we can say it's a circle, an uneven donut. Well, there is something anyway.
Yes, well, let's put it so. According to, yes, when we were conducting the experiment, we were recording everything. That's why, let's say, it is recognizable. Well, of course, we would like it to be better, but I think if, let's say, the operator worked a little more, because we actually did this experiment just before the program. That's why she practically did it without preparation. That's the reason it...
Well, there is some experience after all.
Yes, there is experience, right.
Anyway, it's already something.
Well, it was interesting. The guys especially note, those who participated in the experiment, that basically the image appeared immediately. I mean, even before the operator said.
Well, it's very different. It's one thing when a person visualizes, while it's another thing when a finished image comes and a person sees it. Of course, this difference is quite noticeable.
Right. As Gennadiy Krokhalev wrote, it proves that the thought, that it can be transmitted, that it is material. Well, as we know, that precisely his ideas were not accepted either. Because, as we know, the official position in science is that a thought is ideal. It is not material.
Well, it was the expression of Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, that the thought cannot be material, because it is ideal.
Right, and?
It turns out that Krokhalev proved this as well, that the thought is material, and that Lenin was wrong. And you, it turns out, have already confirmed this.
Yes, we've confirmed the experiments by Krokhalev that the thought is material indeed. Well, this proves again that if the thought can be transmitted...
Well, this proves a lot.
Yes.
But it means that it can be shielded somehow. Well, in one of his works, Krokhalev...
Quite by accident, yes.
...also described that it can be shielded. A person went into a special room, the one whose hallucinations they photographed before, and everything worked out.
Visual images disappear.
Quite right. The images disappear when they place him in a shielded room, and so he has concluded that they come from outside.
Yes.
They do not even arise in him. And this way he proved that secondary consciousness through which they come doesn't belong to a human.
Right.
Meaning it belongs to someone and something.
By the way, regarding shielding, we shielded the operator too. Well, we didn't recreate the room. We just thought, why should we shield the one who receives, if we can shield the source?
Well, basically there's no difference. He was working, pardon me, against the system where this image came from, against secondary consciousness, while in your case the source was near. So you could shield something else. In any case, it proves the transmission of the thought.
Yes, so...
Did you close her in the room?
No.
Shield it.
We took... Well, we made everything easier. We took an aluminum pot, wrapped it in foil.
And you put the operator in there and covered the pot with a lid.
Well, almost like that.
Honestly. What else have you added? Bay leaf, garlic?
No, nothing like that was added. But the operator herself said that she felt quite comfortable. I mean,
Sitting in a pot?
Yes, she felt this.
Did you indeed put her in the pot, didn't you?
No, we didn't put her in a pot. We put a special soft towel in the pot and put the pot over her head. I mean,
Well, thank God.
we closed, let's say. Yes.
You know, friends, full guard sometimes leads. They could have found a big aluminium cauldron and put the operator in there. I wouldn't be surprised at anything.
Yes. And after shielding the source and shielding the operator, there was nothing on film at all. Meaning, after we did.
That is, the operator, as if didn't even transmit, the shield worked anyway.
Right. That is, it works.
Well, there is another interesting thing. If there was just an aluminium pot without foil, there would be a transmission. The thin foil works even much better than thick aluminium. Well, this is if we take ordinary food-grade aluminium. A special alloy was used there when our pyramid was built. Everything was serious. By the way, you could close her in the pyramid.
It also shields, doesn't it?
Well, it wouldn't be the same in the pyramid. Of course, it's more fun with the pot over the head.
As Krokhalev himself wrote, these experiments and materiality of thought precisely prove what is now denied by official science. This is the existence of the subtle world, of the astral world, the phenomena that people encounter in everyday life. It turns out that they exist. However, they are denied. And in this regard, yes, it turns out that we worked with the secondary consciousness, with the help of which the image was transmitted. However,
Right, this is the main source.
right. And in this regard, we can refer to the topic of influence, say, on people in particular, how, for instance, it is described in the Isosmos book. And now we see a lot of evidence of people committing suicides. For instance, just recently, our participants also shared a video from the subway when two perfectly normal young guys jumped under a train, under a moving subway train. As we know from the Isosmos book, this is the work of such entities which are called conducts. So
And by the way, if we could shoot the people who commit suicide under the influence of third forces, in particular of that very conduct, using the Krokhalev method, we would easily see a picture. The picture of that substitution which is imposed on them. You know, people jump over a window, of a balcony and roofs, and they see completely different thing. This substitution occurs already at the level of picture perception. It turns out that space changes, what a person perceives changes. These are the changes that take place around him. He perceives these images. And you're right here.
yes, so it turns out that the denial of the materiality of thought doesn't allow, let's put it so, or doesn't let people to assess the situation reasonably and to look differently at the things that happen to them in everyday life. I mean, to take into account the fact that the thought is material. Yes, and that there is a reason that all religious scriptures say that you can't think badly, you can't tune into bad things, because this comes true. The only thing that Krokhalev and the scientists asserted was that the thought had great energy. But as we know, the thought, until a human endows it with his attention, doesn't have energy. That is, even when a person, say, observes it in his consciousness.
So a simple question, you take the pictures of, you've shown us a bagel, number 1 and the like, what the operator was transmitting. But have you photographed your thought,
No.
your power, or the fact that the operator acted, her power?
In this experiment, the operator acted as a third force, in fact. That is, let's put it so, this experiment has proved that in the same way any other operator can impose, let's say, anything on a human being.
The third forces.
The third forces, yes, well, yes.
Just explain to our friends, to those who don't quite understand what the third and second forces are and the like. In this context, this implies the intervention of anybody, whether they are kanduks, whether they are operators, whether they are people or something else, meaning the third forces. The second force is considered to be, the primary force is the force coming from the personality, from the human oneself. The second force of influence is considered to be the system itself, I mean, what we call the material thinking substance. Then we call it absolute, the universal mind, the devil, no matter how it's called. Also the information field and the like, meaning the external influence or the part to which our secondary consciousness belongs. And it is precisely through secondary consciousness that the influence of these third forces comes. In this case, it is the operator.
Yes. And it turns out that if a person doesn't trace the work of his consciousness, doesn't observe the thoughts that are not his, which are imposed on him, then it turns out, in this case, he
could easily become a victim.
Yes, he could easily become a victim, and he becomes.
And he doesn't distinguish whether it's his thoughts, his aspiration, his desire, or someone has imposed this on him.
Yes.
Well, this is quite widely used. Well, I think it's a pretty serious topic. It's a pretty broad one. But before we turn to it, I've just recalled now, you told us that you used a lot of different cameras. Used both digital cameras and the simple ones and the like. Well, I've recalled that when we also started such an interesting volunteer project to study skyfish, we also tried a lot of different cameras. Started with film cameras because then digital ones. Then we started going over various filters on them, looking for the places where we could find these skyfish and the like. But it turned out to be very easy. Out of a certain number of cameras, we found the one that started to shoot all these easily, and it turned out that there were a lot of them everywhere. And we even have them sometimes. Yes, for instance, while shooting there are about a dozen cameras around, and skyfish often appear. It's true, one day it's plasmoids, another day it's skyfish, so 9 cameras do not see them, while one does. And in the same way, 9 cameras do not see how someone blinks wrongly, while one camera does. And what happens again, that exactly the sensitivity of this camera can perceive what we are not able to perceive with the eyes, what we are not able to perceive, say, with other cameras, yes? I mean to catch while this one camera. However, we will not mention it. I understand that the questions will appear, guys. We're not going to advertise that company, because people will start looking for these cameras all over the world. They're not the most expensive, not of the most popular ones, but for some reason this camera shoots this way. And another reason why we don't do this, I'm sorry, I'll be blunt. You'll take these cameras and we'll search for those who can blink wrongly, identify them and envenom people's lives. Live in peace. And let them be side by side, with us peacefully. They only do good, not harm. Now we are again getting back to our material thoughts that come. And what did it end up with after all? We understand what your experiments ended up with. Besides, I see that you've printed out only a few pictures to show to others. But what did the experiments of Krokhalev end up with? What is his fate? The person has made the greatest discovery after all.
Yes.
He should at least have been nominated for the Nobel Prize.
Yes.
He should be known to everyone. While most of our friends hear from you for the first time that there is such a person, this is a breakthrough after all. This is a breakthrough, excuse me, in psychiatry, isn't it so? This is a breakthrough in our everyday life. All the priests should keep his portrait at home, because it proves, first and foremost, the existence of external forces. And this is direct evidence of the existence of the spiritual world. We can expand on this topic and bring you to this if it's interesting, but this is real. First of all, it proves that there is the world of the devil, so it proves that there is also the world of God. This proves that negative influences come to a person from outside, and it is this influence that makes a human, well, say, not quite a human, but turns him into an animal. Due to these influences, the animal part of people starts prevailing in them. Well, this is also evidence of the fact that there is another part, the spiritual component of a human, and this is direct evidence that there is a God. Isn't it so? Well, do we see this? I doubt we will find somewhere that he has got something for this, that someone has recognized him, or something else. And what is his fate?
I've just told you about how the scientific environment treated these experiments of him. What you're saying is indeed in two ways. Some said that surely it was a sensation.
These are honest people. These are honest, decent people.
These are honest people. They are. Yes, this is unique research. And others, of course, said that this was impossible when Krokhalev himself was asked a question. What do you think? Why they don't advance these experiments? He said, you know, by my experiments, I am simply shattering this Lenin's concept that the thought is not material, but it is ideal.
Just wait. I have to argue here. After all, he was not supported abroad either. Okay, he lived in Soviet times. There was such communistic materialism and the like, when one couldn't really argue with the authority like Lenin. If Lenin said the thought is ideal and not material, then it must be so. We understand this. But what about the situation abroad? After all, his work was known abroad. And it was silence as well.
It's interesting, yes, about the fact that science, yes.
But the point is that it was his colleagues who put much resistance to his ideas. This way, such a scientific psychiatric concept was shattered for them. The concept that a psychic thought of brain...
The product of our brain activity.
Yes.
Yes.
And the fact that he was precisely working the main contingent that he used, well, were just mentally ill people in the alcohol treatment unit who, let's put it so, experienced hallucinations under the influence of...
Well, due to intoxication, let's say.
Intoxication, yes. That was the main scientific explanation then, that all these images arise as a result of damage, impairment of brain activity, while it turns out that Krokhalev was shattering all this concept. But what's interesting...
Now we are going to draw a parallel. Sorry, I'll digress a bit so that we... Just a moment. Why is it precisely a mentally ill person plus alcohol? And pronounce hallucinations to the extent that they can be photographed, like via the operator. It means that these are severely imposed thoughts. And why doesn't this work for an ordinary person? Well, the guys tried, took a lot of pictures, and it didn't work.
There is some barrier which is removed when, yes, with alcohol.
Alcohol, whether it's alcohol, drugs, well, or other medications, yes? And they allow secondary consciousness to absolutely manipulate the personality, because these medications, well, say with toxic effect, they weaken primary consciousness so much that it directly passes the information without any protest, and a person becomes the one who was called a slave of Satan, right? Meaning a completely controlled puppet. He's a zombie. He literally becomes zombified and controlled. And how many of these people we see when a person is more like an animal than a human, with occasional gleams of humanity and the like, isn't it so? Everything is not so simple in this world. Everything is interconnected. And you are quite right that this is not exactly a mental illness, and of course this shattered the concept and caused tension among colleagues.
And here it's also a bit paradoxical. Material priorities are sort of recognized in science after all, meaning a human is a body, yes, he's matter, he's a biological being, and at the same time, as if separately, without recognizing the spiritual world, the invisible world. In fact, one says, no, the human psyche cannot be proved as material, that it is material, right?
And then what?
The thought is material, yes.
Well, I also have a little misunderstanding here.
And so do I.
How is it that thought cannot be material? Even if we take the usual scientific paradigm, yes? A derivative of the work of neurons and the like. And what is a neuron? It is a material, right?
Matter.
Well, commonplace chemical reactions, electromagnetic impulses and everything else. Okay, but they produce these impulses. What do they generate? Interaction among themselves due to the energy impulse. Isn't it matter? Well, this is also based on the scientific concept. In any case, it turns out that the thought is material.
No, there were objections right away.
No.
Meaning such...
Do you know what the problem is? I'll call things by their proper names, because the ones who, pardon me, are called representatives of the ninth circle extremely don't want you and me to know that it's very easy to control us through material thought. It is very easy to force us as a crowd, to love someone, to obey someone. Even in thoughts, when we see that the person doesn't correspond to the image which is imposed on us, we understand this. However, even in thoughts, we don't allow ourselves to say no, or to vote for another, or something else, or to argue somehow, because our thoughts, that are supposedly a product of our consciousness, our brain and so this product of our brain tells us that this person is good. He is doing his best for us. A king always has his manners, but the king is kind after all. Or it tells us the next king will come and it will be good as well. Isn't that right?
Yes.
This is because of precisely these moments of influence through power, which we raised this issue in the previous program, the Ninth Circle. Precisely for that, they need all these outrages which they do, so that their operators keep us like a herd in certain pens of our consciousness. And that's why they are extremely uninterested in the fact that this information will reach people, that we will know and understand, because by understanding and knowing, we are already becoming forearmed. And we understand that we can get rid of this. For instance, well, trivially, study your consciousness or read the Allat book. Use it and you will know how to confront this. It is not difficult. It is very easy to control these thoughts if you want to. But then it turns out that it is impossible to impose anything on a person, because any thought that comes in from outside is just blocked already at the entrance. And a person is already free enough in this world. But then he gets out of the herd. He becomes like a wild animal for the representatives of the Ninth Circle, and this is scary for them. I would also like to, I'm sorry a little touch on the Ninth Circle. I'm sorry for getting back to that program. It is extremely painful. But I would like to emphasize, what do you think why? They are striving to reduce number of humanity to a significant degree. Ideally, they say, 500 million people is great. It's even carved on their tablets at that.
The Georgia Guidestones, yes?
500 million, yes, it's ideal.
The first paragraph.
I'll explain, so that you don't rack your brains. It's easier for them to control. When the number of people grows, they have to involve strangers in their circle of those in power, so that they can control us, to keep our thoughts in leash. Here, of course, the media, television and their rhapsodes play a big role. But again, they can speak openly not to everyone about everything, but there should be initiates. For what? So that they can control, for example, those very representatives of journalism, right? Not everyone can be bought, but almost everyone can be controlled at the level of consciousness, to cause doubts, rejections, and something else. A thought is a material thing. It can be easily transmitted. And what does it cause in people? Obedience, consent, and the like. But for this they involve a lot of strangers. And these strangers are strangers because they start talking sometimes. And all the information which they have concealed for a long time have kept. Of course they had a lot of information throughout the centuries. But now it started coming to light. Just because, again, as they say, when you get to a certain level, both in show business and in something else, well, you remember from the previous program, then you should either join them or stay on the sidelines of life. But the thought is material after all, and it is easy to get rid of it. It's even very easy.
Igor Mikhailovich, you've also...
So, we're getting back to fate of Krokhalev.
Yes. That's where we would like to get back to this point, because you've said about the representatives of the Ninth Circle, and indeed, the development work and research were carried out, but they were carried out in closed back rooms, in closed laboratories. And this research continued because Krokhalev himself said in one of his most recent articles, just before his death, that there was already information that psychotronic weapons were being created, and that it had been created in other countries, and possibly it was being developed, it was being created in our country.
It's completely ineffective. One can influence, there can be a certain polar effect, which causes, like a microwave burns, fears a little bit. This is at certain frequencies. Well, it's rather energy consuming, but quite effective. However, what Krokhalev said, I will just explain to people. He said that one could create false images, which would be seen by representatives of, say, the opposing party, and they will shoot at false targets. It is extremely difficult to fix and cover a whole group of people for a long time. Why? Because there are reflection effects. There people will also start seeing the same false images. To shield oneself is extremely difficult. There is another problem. If someone is a little bit skilled in his consciousness control, soldier's technique, then he couldn't care less. This image cannot be imposed on him. He won't perceive it. Therefore, and they've studied this, yes? They do explore this because, again, they're improving methods of influencing us. Well, it's normal.
Yes, and he was just saying that in his latest family archives since '95, I guess there are records where he shares and says that I am not only engaged in psychiatry, I've already gone much further, and I already have thousands of researches on influence of precisely this psychic energy on reality, on what's going on.
Well, he touched upon what is called psychic energy. He touched upon such an understanding as the power of attention, and where a person invests attention from a specific standpoint, that starts happening. Why? He really got in too deep. So, what is next?
Well, yes.
Well, it turns out that his proof that the thought is material, he wrote it himself in his works, that it is no longer a matter of psychiatry, but physics, since it...
Well, natural, these are physical processes, of course.
And again, the materiality of thought, it is very interesting. It turns out that some people... Here we have a series of programs called Game of Professionals, where a topic of maniacs was brought up, and where they said that they committed crimes under some tremendous energy pressure, well, as they described. So, it turns out that it forces some people to kill the other ones, and forces other people to throw themselves under the train. That is a certain third force,
Of course.
which controls people's lives. And in fact, people are like puppets for it. Because, well, it turns out, let's look at the situation that somebody is sitting somewhere and controls another person at a distance, like some kind of biorobot, and he performs some actions instead of him.
Well, look, let's give an example. You have just mentioned the maniacs from the program. We will take Chikatilo's story, okay? When he lured the victim, he was walking ahead. The victim followed him into the forest belt, perfectly understanding how this would end, but was following him obediently. When he was about to start, there was a path next to them, just a few meters away.
And people were walking along it.
People were walking while he was torturing a woman there. And they didn't notice. So there was a certain impact not only on the victim, who saw that people were coming, not one person, but a group of people, and she could have made any sound. It was a distance of several meters, and they would have paid attention. But how couldn't they notice? Pardon me, this wasn't summer. They were not in the bushes. It was such a period when there were no leaves. And at the same time, it means someone is covering this up, someone who controls much more. And for such a long time, the police could not catch him. When they approached closely, they walked away. There are many mysterious moments like that regarding maniacs. But I don't want to bring up this topic too much. Why? Because there would be an impression that we justify them, but in fact, if we approach dishonestly, they were also victims. They were a tool in someone else's hands. But in my opinion, there is also their fault, because they didn't develop spiritually, they didn't liberate themselves. If a person is spiritually free, it is impossible to influence him. This is unrealistic, not by any third force. And here, if we simply consider medicine, right? When, for example, a person is in a prayer state, his brain frequency, its work significantly slows down. It is equated almost to a person in a coma. If a person is in a deep meditative state, it decreases significantly. And excuse me, if a person is really able to perform a spiritual practice and he leaves, then practically our EEG machines basically show the straight line. That is, they show that the person is dead. While a person is breathing at this time, he has a heartbeat. But we don't see information. Why is that? After all, these are material things again. Or, let's say there are practices that vary lotus. When a person seriously performs lotus spiritual practice, what do we see? We see the state of a newborn baby on the 8th, 9th day. This is the rarest condition that literally lasts just a few hours. Then it changes. After all, when a baby is born, it has a very slow rhythm. A sharp surge occurs on the 8th, 9th day. You have to catch it because it lasts just a few minutes. And it happens with a certain frequency on the 8th day. After a certain time, well, is literally around an hour. And these surges, there are 12 of them. No more, no less. And they are very different. And again, there is calmness. And then during 3 months, the rhythm is slow again. And only after that, the rhythm begins to rise. And why, when a person is really in a deep meditative state, then similar to these surges he has, only if, in that case, it was after an hour and a little more. In this case, it rises in several minutes. That is, these surges occur in almost complete calmness. This means a lot. It is interesting, of course. Well, we digressed a little, sorry. We can discuss these topics for a long time.
Yes, about Krokhalev.
Let's get back to Krokhalev.
Yes, again, his fate is very interesting, because at the end of his life he was actively engaged in scientific work and wrote books, various works. And just before his death, he was very cheerful and was going to publish his sixth book. However, as we know, he committed suicide. And then a question arises. Could Krokhalev die because of the influence of what he studied, that is, those third forces?
Yes, of course. Because he messed with something he wasn't prepared for. He accidentally came across something unknown. Well, and we know that those dense forests are full of predators, and he just got to them. Hence his suicide.
So it turns out, because he didn't possess the knowledge.
He started. He didn't have any knowledge at all, but he accidentally came across this. Got carried away by the fact that the thought was material, and started to explore this. And he went even further. He started studying to invest the power of his attention, well, like concentration, the power of thought, and he began to notice strange things. And he just became visible to predators. Imagine this, a hare that runs with a bell and such a small flag on its tail, you see? So that all wolves and foxes can see it. So he became such a small hare painted orange, with a bell and small flag, naturally to be eaten. Unfortunately, but it is true. This is inevitable.
Well, it turns out, Igor Mikhailovich, and here is such a question then. We now have quite a large number of people, I think, who come across this, the supernatural. What could we advise them? What could help? How can they, let's say, study, but...
Study your religions, and thoroughly. Any religion today, well, I mean fundamental religions, they come from a pure source. And there is the knowledge in them on how to avoid becoming a victim of these wolves and foxes. This is the most important thing.
Now it becomes clear. Why is it so that Krokhalev's colleagues didn't take a risk of continuing these experiments and...
Because they are not suicides.
Yes, without knowledge.
Naturally, they understood perfectly well. And many people thought already during their lifetime that this will end this way. Because people deep inside, at subconscious level, let's put it so, they feel and understand all this perfectly well. I think that he himself perfectly understood that he with his bare hands and without protection, I'm sorry, was touching bare wires. But curiosity triumphed. In fact, he wanted to convey this understanding, and he strove and tried, made attempts, made his way through. But in private conversations, everyone admired him. But as soon as he stepped aside, people started talking among themselves. It cannot be true, although they saw the results themselves.
Yes, Igor Mikhailovich, but if we talk precisely about the experiments and researches conducted by Durov and Kaczynski, then there was also such an interesting point regarding telepathy that they instilled a certain action into a person, and he didn't just see the picture, but a certain need from within really arose in him. Let's suppose Durov set Kaczynski a task to scratch his ear.
You have an itch in your ear and you do it automatically. This is an involuntary movement. It is thoughtless.
That is, there goes an imprint specifically on this primary consciousness.
Absolutely right. Why is this happening? Because again, how is the image transmitted? Guys, right now Andrei has revealed the biggest secret of the non-circle, in fact. This is for those who can think. Why? Because the transmission of the image. This is the moment of manipulation. Well, I mean, no matter how they control or try, they still act by means of an image. There is no such inculcation, and it is impossible to inculcate only under hypnosis. You're eating something salty and they tell you that it's sweet, and you say, yes, it's sweet, and the like. A hypnotist needs to speak. He needs to be heard, and so on. Well, it depends on what kind of hypnosis it is. We do not take, they vary in the like of different levels. But the real thing, what is called an imprint, that is, it occurs regardless of the distance, wherever the person is. Well, again, let's say shielded rooms help to get rid of...
They block.
This inculcation and of the third forces. But you won't sit in a shielded cell all your life so that no one gets to you. It's enough to go out and you're undergoing a colossal attack. It's a constant attack, say, from the outside. This is from the system itself. And everyone sees this. All of a sudden there arises some emotions or there are images that you're thinking about all the time. The actors are playing all kinds of movies in your head. You're talking to someone, you're looking for something. Well, consciousness is not silent. You don't need this at all, but you are involved in this process. Who hasn't faced this? Well, you don't need it. You need to think about, I don't know, for instance, what to cook for today, or what to eat. Well, I take something simple. While it keeps coming to your head how you are talking with someone and arguing about something, you're trying to prove something or something else, or they're trying to prove something to you and you don't want to. Well, I speak figuratively. Well, constant talks, constant conversations, constant tug of war from what you need. And in order for a person to be able to calmly say, think about what to cook or what to eat, he needs to work on his consciousness. Then it will be calm, right? Yet, there are also other imprints. It is not only a subjective image, that is, a simple example. A person wants to scratch his ear and he gives this command. It is just a command to act. But these commands to act also cause a lot of consequences. If one knows how to transmit, he is an operator, while the second, let's say, is open to perception. And who among us, pardon me, is closed to such perception?
This is the worst thing, yes.
Let's take religions. Yes, we have just mentioned the altered state of consciousness when a person is in a prayer state, in a deep prayer state. Who knows how to pray nowadays? Once we conducted a very interesting experiment. We were extremely interested, in fact, and that is why we actually took thousands of measurements with different people and the like, on EEG machine as it should be done. And we tested masses of priests and believers. Speaking honestly, very few are able to enter a prayerful state. When we can observe it based on the rhythms, the majority of them were superficial and spasmodic, at the times approaching somewhere close. Yet some individuals, yes, they actually get deeper. These were true prayerful states. They are very close to meditative states, and meditations exactly the same. We tested so many people who perform meditative practices, excuse me, the Tibetans and many others, and lamas, who were even worse. I don't know why. They probably never performed meditations, they merely teach and talk about them. Sorry, but we talked to a lot of people, and very many of them went through research, but the result was somehow weak compared to, again, we take Christianity and we take Islam. These are fundamental religions. The percentage is huge among clergy in comparison with the lamas. Why even? Because among believers the percentage was much higher. If we take the amount, then among the clergy. Well, this can also be explained. A busy person, he works, he needs to teach others how to pray, he has a lot of problems. Well, when will he do that? He has no time. These are jokes, but it's true.
Yes.
But there are priests in various religions who can generate such state. So, during these states, it is impossible to influence a person in any way. But coming out of this state, if he doesn't have a proper skill, he becomes exposed to the same influence again. And while talking to these people, when speaking to them, I ask direct questions. Do attacks and desires occur? Well, yes, we repent, we oppose them. And when I asked, but why do you let them in at all? After all, in that very Jesus' teachings it was mentioned. And why? And there was also guidance from the prophet on how to get rid of this so that it doesn't happen. Well, it is for the saints, while we are... But who are the saints? A simple question. Did they come from another planet? Like some? No, they are ours. They are the same as you. It's just that they put more effort into this. We're not lazy and treated it conscientiously. That is why they became saints. Well, I mean real saints and not those who are canonized by the order from the top.
Yes, a universal tool is given for absolutely everyone, yes.
Of course it is. Surely. Everything is open to a human in this world, if he has a desire and aspiration. I'm sorry, we can't talk about this for a long time. Let's get back to the experiment of two respected researchers. There, it's also interesting, he telepathically gave orders through feelings, and his partner, so to say, perceived them. But when they entered the shielded room, yes, the orders did not work. Again, what does this confirm? The materiality of thought and everything else. Well, it was enough to open at least a pee-hole, and the order worked. Well, we can check it, for instance. We again take a regular mobile phone. We take a food foil and we wrapped it well. We wrap the mobile phone in one layer and try to call this phone from another one. It will not work because it shields everything. This is a usual foil, but it's enough to open even a small window like this, and a signal immediately gets through. The same is here.
Yes, and thanks to these experiments and your answers, one understands.
But what does this indicate? This indicates the field structure of the transmitted signal or image, just for you to understand.
Yes, one starts thinking about whether the thoughts that come to us are actually our thoughts, some of our brilliant ideas or not. And here, of course, People start thinking about whether these are their desires, whether this is their desire indeed, or it's just that someone else needs this.
Well, let's just take the famous inventors, shall we?
Yes.
For instance, the most famous inventor. Well, the majority of people will immediately mention Tesla, right? But I'll add, may I? Tesla, Bartini. They're somewhere close. They're graduates of the same place. They came from a place where they were taught and trained on how to become a human, how to resist thoughts, on how to develop spiritually, and many other things. However, what did both of them learn from this? They learned only the art of how to
achieve fame.
How to get information from the system itself. How to get the images that they need, and that's it. Yes, they made huge breakthroughs in science. We don't even need to mention Tesla. Few people know about Bartini. But to make it clear, Bartini was engaged in building airplanes. His planes... Excuse me, he died a long time ago. And he was not really recognized. And as a matter of fact, Tesla also didn't receive anything good during his life. They sought fame. They sought to satisfy their own ego and pridefulness. This led them astray from the right path, but it led them to such an engineering research, let's say pedestal. But they, as people, didn't receive in this life what they wanted. Just an illusion of it all. But they've done a lot. That very Bartini, I'll continue, yes? He made such discoveries that are used today. The inverted gull-wing and many other things. Where did he get this information from? As well as that very Tesla. And again, what does it mean to get this image? They received a ready-made image. That is, absolutely everything in detail. Well, it doesn't matter what a person does. If he uses these methods of obtaining information, then he gets a finished product. In a full description, specific and detailed. He is kind of flipping through drawings. Everything was covered with drawings. But in order to understand this, you have to study it, of course. You have to strive for it, and then it all works. Everything is there. Everything is invented long ago.
But it's interesting how this is presented, that it was his unique ability which he developed, the so-called eidetic images, which are very interestingly...
But he was constantly developing. Well, excuse me, these were the images that both Bartini and Tesla developed. They were taught this, but they were taught for something else. Excuse me, completely different. And the results should have been different.
But publicly available information is presented in a completely different way.
Absolutely right.
That this is a unique ability.
And also...
a rare one.
Right.
Right.
And at the same time, all the geniuses, many of who...
Well, this borders on schizophrenia.
That's why there were assumptions that these eidetic images, that the very mechanism of their occurrence is very close to the occurrence of hallucinations, and the same assumption...
And this is precisely a hallucination. What did they actually get? They received that very hallucination in a detailed form. Well, saying the way everything was written in technical documentation, and that's what they got too. They received a ready-made object which they could turn, view from all sides, and look inside of it. This is nothing but a hallucination. Or one might say, it's like a hologram that you can manipulate with. We don't have such computers yet, but we strive for it. Even in science fiction films, they're shown somewhere near. But these computers have already existed for a long time. They have worked for a long time. It's just that guys like Tesla, Bartini, and many others knew how to use them. And by the way, again about the materiality of thought. Let's take that very Einstein. Didn't he talk about this? He did.
Yes.
Well, it was told before him too.
And it was Einstein who said that imagination is much more important than knowledge. Also, whom he served. Yes.
Well, it's not imagination, it's receiving. After all, you have to know how to put the power of your attention into what you need. If you are not taught this, no matter what efforts you make, no matter how you strive for it, you will not succeed. Because there are certain techniques, there are certain tricks and details.
Oratory art.
Well, oratory art is the same thing, sorry. One should have certain power which he or she must take somewhere. One has to know how to sell oneself and how to make people interested. After all, again, we've touched upon the oratory art. What is the main thing in the oratory art? Let's ask a psychiatrist.
It's an ability, by the way, to convey images, to carry them. For instance, the one who knows how to convey information through images, perception of such a person will be much stronger.
The most important thing, my friends, the most important thing in oratory is to attract attention. Everything else is nonsense, a matter of technique.
As they call it, yes.
And in that case, a person should only know how at a serious level, should know how to convey the information in the right way. To hold the attention, well, it's trifles. And the most important thing is to make imprints. And imprints come in the form of images, right? Well, this is already classified information. Hitler was taught this for more than a year, just for you to know. That was when he was already admitted, and when they decided that, yes, he would be Hitler. A closed society spent a lot of time teaching him this, but we see the result. We saw it, and remember it. And there are a lot of people like him. Let's take Trotsky. There is no need to go far, but to be heard, they must possess power. And to possess power, they must take this power somewhere. While, I'm sorry, power it's... You cannot recharge yourself from the socket. There are only two ways. One way is through someone's life and suffering, and the second way is through love. If it's through love, it won't work for evil, it will work for the creation, and this does not suit them. So the way of gaining power through love doesn't suit them. Then what's left is like the ninth circle. Well, why like? This is exactly the ninth circle. It is a direct use with evil and everything else in the world. To possess a certain power, they must take someone's life. And how many people were destroyed by that very Trotsky? And how many people were destroyed by that very Hitler, that very Lenin,
Yes.
and many others? Didn't they know that? Again, that very Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, right? Who asserted that thought couldn't be material, because it was ideal, and at the same time they blessed expeditions to Tibet, one after another, which were led by
Boki, Barchenko.
and many others, yes. Why, in search of knowledge, Hitler also sent his expeditions there afterwards, isn't it so?
But why? It turns out, Igor Mikhailovich, it turns out that for all people, he says one version, that thought is ideal, while at the same time they themselves understand that it is wrong.
Because they possess secret knowledge. Because due to this knowledge, they became the ones who we know, you see?
Yes, and by the way, regarding the topic of crowd control, because the main thing they mention is that the speaker should have some charm and
Should have charisma.
To attract attention. Well, what charm did the Hitler have, pardon me, and Trotsky?
that very Napoleon, yes,
That very Napoleon.
whom people were afraid of and most of them shuddered at.
They were so afraid of him just because, when they saw him, they were afraid of him.
Yes,
But there was no one to be afraid of, a pocket-sized man? Indeed.
yes, and it was strange that people behaved this way when they met him.
Just note how people were losing consciousness during their speeches. Well, everything was in a classical way, the way it was supposed to be. That is, when the image is being transmitted and with great power, then naturally all this is. But for some reason they don't tell what was behind it and how they received this power and where, and who trained them. But it's easy to find them in history. In all cases it is very easy. When, who, and by whom he was trained and the like. After all, everything can be tracked, if there is a will and aspiration. And this is true, and you can't turn away from this.
Yes, it's just that modern people know about the oratory art from a completely different perspective. For them it is...
Well, there is an oratory art when a person tells interesting things, presents them easily. It's like a teacher, you know. For example, at university or at school. If it is boring and uninteresting, then few people know the discipline. And if he presents it in a variety of ways, colorfully, if he can throw some simple images, without moments of influence through power, then students behave well and their performance is good. Why? Because it's interesting. Likewise, it is with the speaker. He must attract attention. He must hold it. However, there are speakers, yet there are dictators. And the difference is huge. Those whom we named are dictators. They simply suppressed the crowd. Moreover, regardless of the amount of people, whether it was small or large, they simply suppressed them. And those one listened to them and fulfilled their will.
Right, and at all times, those who were watching those dictators, as you say, Then, in particular, I've come across how Bacteria even talked about the fact that people, by using various intonations or hand gestures, simply forced the crowd to fall back on their most cruel instincts. Smart people.
Well, again, Bacteria was describing the external influence that is sending. Well, this was used even before the times of Rome, but became more popular in Rome when the speakers waved their hands, called, attracted attention. What do hand gestures actually do? A simple question. Is this a throw of energy? He takes and sends it. Or what is it?
Attraction of attention.
It is straight attraction of attention. It is not boring to watch. Our eyes tend to get tired if we look at one and the same motionless person, and he is telling us something for a while. He is just sitting there, and that's it, just like Andrei is doing now. He froze and that's it. Well, you have to agree, it will be boring. A person must live, he must move and the like.
Dynamically.
I will give a simple example, okay? Who is more interesting to talk to? For example, a reindeer herder from Yakutia or an Italian?
To an Italian.
If you understand.
That's right. When people know, when they have communicated with one and the other, then they understand. Why? Because Italians, they are charismatic, lively, and so on. And when an orator behaves like an Italian, his image doesn't become boring. Well, simply figuratively. And the whole conveying takes place from the invisible side. And regardless of whether he waves his hands or not. But in order to hold the crowd, he needs to attract them to himself, first of all. Nothing more. And afterwards there are images already. Then there are techniques and technologies.
It's also interesting, when we were looking for information, we came across the fact that Hitler, when planning his speeches, he planned them mainly for the evening time, or even for the night time.
For the night.
For the night time, certainly.
What is the reason for that?
I'll say more simply, when the sun sets, it's much easier to hold a huge crowd without losses. And moreover, the larger the crowd, the more easy it is to hold it. And when the sun shines, there is a problem. It takes a lot of effort. Why? Again, we come to the conclusion that these images are transmitted, by which an operator controls the crowd. These are polar structures. And the photon load, that is, when the light shines strongly, there is significant resistance and large losses. And during the night, it's great. This is the main time for evil, and this has been known for centuries.
Yes, and in the modern world, they use it now. If you watch television, how it is developed.
Of course.
Prime time on television.
Yes, the most popular time, the most expensive time.
And what is shown at this time?
And they show exactly what we have to, or rather what they want us to understand, perceive.
For these images to remain.
These images implicitly, yes, so that we perceive and perform what they want. This is normal.
Well, I've just remembered how a research was conducted back in the 70s, when it was about that very television, when they observed the level of aggression among teenagers and school children in 2 Canadian cities. And with the advent of television in the city, the number of these dominant clashes increased, as well as the amount of aggression among children. And there was such a high percentage.
160%.
Yes, that's why it's really clear that all these mass media are used to manipulate us and have been used since ancient times, as well as that very rhapsodists.
That very rhapsodists and everything else.
And Solon.
Right, Arkan Solon, yes.
Yes, exactly the same. The innovation which he introduced,
Yes.
that it is impossible not to take part in some disagreements.
Various civil strife.
If there is a civil strife, yes, then a person must necessarily take someone's position.
Absolutely.
Anyone who doesn't take
Of
a
course.
political position, has his own point of view, must belong to a certain group.
Either this or that one, right?
Staying out of this was prohibited.
There was even punishment.
But haven't we seen, pardon me this, it was he who introduced this at the time. Yet doesn't everything happen according to his method until the present day? You are either a friend or a foe. You are either with us or against us, and the like. Well,
Neutrality was not welcomed. People were drawn en masse into all this. But what is also interesting, after all, indeed, since ancient times and through works works, let's say, not of art, but through literally works.
And this is an art. It's an art of manipulation. That very art, that very imprints.
That very Solon used precisely these works of his elegies in order to simply control the crowd and achieve these political goals of his.
Well, it was merely satisfaction of his personal ambitions, as he believed. Yet were those ambitions his personal?
However, what was also important is what you have said. The images were important. That precisely...
Of course. Again, how does the system control us? After all, it inserts in us a picture of what we should desire, what we should strive for, what we want to become. Does it insert that we must become spiritually developed, free people, that we should strive for life eternal, and not this ghostly temporary one? No, never. The system does not insert this. It inserts that we must achieve something, become someone, or command someone, even if we have no prospect, we understand nothing, but at least someone if we cannot become someone at home, then at least for a neighbor. Well, at least for someone we must be a dictator. Well, isn't that so? Far and wide.
Yes.
That's what the system is like.
Igor Mikhailovich, such a question may... I've got a question, and many viewers might also have it. Those who were interested in Durov's experiments in general, how he carried out, put animals into these hypnotic states, how these commands were carried out, why animals obeyed him so much. This is what I noticed. Well, first of all, how it happened. He, with such movements, almost without touching animal hair, meaning with gentle passes, he stroked an animal at first, but for a very short period of time, literally for 2 minutes, yes, he made a contact, and as he described that, we became a single whole with this animal. It was losing its will. And at that moment, I subordinated it to my will. He described it this way. And then, eye contact was very important, necessarily eye to eye. By the way, the first case was very interesting, when he for the first time, being a teenager, tamed a feral dog this way. When he was locked up in the house with this dog. And he said, I had a craving. I was focused on it, to make the dog move backward.
May I interrupt?
Yes.
A really funny story happened to my friends. Once upon a time, quite a long time ago, a good friend of mine was studying psychiatry. He is your colleague, and the like. Well, we had similar conversations, and we also raised the issue both of Duro and of eye to eye. Of animals, we conducted experiments and the like. Such a great experimenter. Well, naturally, there were friends nearby who heard this, saw this, and observed this, because all this didn't happen in one day. They also helped, let's say, to purchase, to find animals for experiments and the like. What is the point of all this? Hypnosis itself, especially with animals, really implies eye contact. Initially, I'll just explain and then tell you a funny story. What are these passes by hands stroking for? In other words, that's what is needed for an animal to calm down and relax. Secondly, it's eye contact. The eyes are open chakrans. We already understand from the above mentioned that thought is material, that it is easily transmitted, and animals easily perceive it and the like. And through an open chakran, it passes without losses. Direct contact takes place, and the like. And it is precisely taming, as you said, of a dog. So one of our good friends, those who read the books, by Anastasia Novik, there is such an author, 2 cheerful characters are described there. One named Zhenya and the other one named Vanya. And so these 2 good friends tried to tame a dog. They were lucky that the dog was small. They stroked it, and one of them started looking into the dog's eyes and began to give it commands, signals. A signal, a command is transmitted via an image, by the way. He imagined an image of what a dog should do, but of course, since both of them had a sense of humor, the dog wasn't big, and he thought that if he gave the command to the dog to attack his friend, and if he did this, it means he possessed something. It worked. It attacked him. It was indeed a funny situation, because the second one was doing exactly the same thing. 2 cheerful characters. But that way they realized that it worked. And that after all, that very Duro was on the right track.
Because a question that has arisen was whether hypnosis is actually transmitted through images.
Of course.
Because animals do not have.
Only the image is transmitted. This is, firstly, the signal of action is transmitted. It is just as we have said. That is, to scratch an ear, right? That's without anything else, just an action is transmitted. And the image of fulfilling the final result is transmitted. If the information is transmitted to the animal, like, I want you to sit down, as it is usually done in hypnosis, the animal will never fulfill this. It will not sit down. But when he conveys the image of the animal sitting, when it is standing, it will sit down. If he transmits the image to sit down next to him, it will come and sit next to him, well, in such kind of elementary commands. That is, the action, in its fulfillment. Precisely this image. And the most difficult thing is, if someone wants to play around, and people will start playing around, it's 100%. Then the most difficult thing in all this is for the operator to learn to concentrate correctly. When a person cannot imagine this command in order to transmit it, the animal will never perceive it. And while working with animals, as it turned out, the hardest and the most difficult thing is to hold and formulate the correct image, with the final action of what the animal should do. Well, I've mentioned our friends, let's say, my friends, on purpose, who have proved that it works.
It works.
It does, yes.
Well, he exactly described that when he was given commands, he was imagining how he was given a command to the animal, right? He precisely, in the detail, as if imagined this path with some details to be fixed on, no?
He took a longer route. I mean, we were simply studying this process.
Well, he described in this way.
Well, the person, yes, the person was engaged in a very in-depth study of what hypnosis is and much more. He needed all this for a profound dissertation, therefore we went from animals to people and back again. There was a lot of justification because everything had to be well grounded and fundamentally at that, through experiments. Well, you yourself understand how this is done. And then we came to a certain conclusion. Well, I insisted on giving a final result at once, while he proceeded according to Duro's method. So when all actions are described in detail, the animal gets confused. Why did Duro also have a percentage of deviations? Because when a complex task is given for implementation, this does not mean that the dog should stand up, come up to smell something, bite someone, take something from someone and bring it to you. No, the animal is not capable of this. The animal always performed the last action out of multiple operations when there are too many tasks. But a human being is a different matter. A person is capable of more extensive actions. And when working with a person, when he is given, well, again, we are talking about non-verbal hypnosis. It is when there is a non-verbal form of presentation, let's say of a command. So with a human being it works a bit differently. A human needs details, not the final result. If you give the final result, he gets confused. Because he has a concept of planning, the animal does not have this. And here there is a significant difference between the animal and the human. And again, why? Because in humans, primary consciousness is more developed. And what is also very important, in primates, it is also more complex. A primate differs, for example, from a dog, from that very cat, and from other animals in the fact that the sequence of actions for it is basically as important as for a human. Well, we already discussed this once in one of the programs, that people are close, let's say their primary consciousness is close to a primate's consciousness in terms of development. That is, it remains around the same level of the age of 5 to 6 years.
Yes. Also, interesting experiments were conducted. People were divided into two groups. One group, under hypnosis, was tasked with building a wall, and they were actually building it. They realized that they had bricks, cement in their hands. They were building.
I'll interrupt to clarify, I'm sorry. You're talking about the experiment.
Yes.
Details are important here. Were they building a real wall, or were they suggested under hypnosis that they were building it, but there was no wall?
Yes, absolutely right.
Right.
And the wall, as such, did not exist, but the person, after building it, realized that it was there, that he felt it with his fingers. And then there was the second group. After the first group left, the second group entered, and people in it were also put into a state of hypnosis. And indeed, in this state, they also found this imaginary wall.
This is a field structure.
Yes.
And there is nothing complicated here. If we take the torus, once we also discussed this in one of the programs regarding the pyramid, if you remember. Let's take the torus, turn it on and hold it in this place. And for example, the next day we come with the magnetometer, and we can easily find the place where a turned-on torus was located. Why? There will be an electromagnetic field, and this bunch will still be hanging there. The same is in this case when people are under hypnosis, they create virtual reality for them in that state, and let's say in that alternative variant of reality. It really exists. When people are put into the state of hypnosis in the same way, by the same technique to the same depth, then they will easily find it, because for them that reality is just as real.
Likewise, it gets developed for them, right?
Of course, absolutely yes. Even without knowing that there is a wall, they will approach the wall and will be able to describe it in detail. Well, this is a regularity.
And here is another one, Igor Mikhailovich. People also had such interesting questions, especially those people who were engaged in research, like we've mentioned Tesla today, that all these inventions, discoveries of the telephone, of the steam engine and the telegraph were not made by a single person, but literally, within several hours difference, the same discovery was made in various parts of the world, and people...
Simultaneously?
Yes, and they ask, how can this be explained too?
Well, how? When a person searches for information, well, for example, many of our friends know this, for example, he has got an idea, a completely new, a perfectly wonderful one, and a person starts working on it, and he finds a lot of information on this topic. How do psychologists explain this? Or let's say, how does psychiatry explain this? That a person did not invest attention into it. He did not pay attention to it. He was always surrounded by it. But, I'm sorry, I will give a simple example. A banal situation. I wanted to buy slippers for myself. Some warm, nice and good ones. I didn't think about slippers at all before. But I suddenly wanted to buy it. I didn't voice this. I didn't go anywhere, either on the internet or anywhere else. And the advertisements start appearing on all sides. You take any gadget and you're offered slippers. Well, who did not come across this? It is a banal example, but it shows how the system itself works. All is simple. If someone has shaken up this idea, it means that it's in the air, as they say.
Yes.
Then someone else is working on it anyway. And these discoveries, as you say, the phone, the light bulb, and everything else. There are plenty of them, of course. Sometimes it happens at the same time. But there were cases at times of a completely different type. When a patent application was submitted for consideration, then information immediately leaked to the other side and a patent was already being formed there as well. Well, these things still happen. Anything happened.
Yes, you've said that the answers are in the air. And also, there was an experiment, a contemporary experiment in our time, when a doctor, I mean a doctor of science, a college lecturer in London, he bought... What did he do? He bought crossword puzzles. He split them into 2 stacks. One was left in London. It was solved by students from London.
The same ones. It was the same, right?
Yes, they were absolutely the same. He divided them into 2 stacks. One of them was solved by students from London, while the other one was sent by train to Liverpool. And already there, after receiving these crossword puzzles, the second group of students also tried to give answers to them. And what also surprised him is that students from Liverpool always gave answers faster, and no matter how they changed a group and a composition of participants, or sent students from London to Liverpool and back, it didn't matter.
But if, let's say, if they had started solving them first in Liverpool, and newspapers would have been sent to London, then in London they would have solved them faster than in Liverpool, right?
Yes, that is, as if they were already walking along the beaten track.
Quite right. Let's take mice. This is such a well-known... We take a mouse, put it into a maze to find a slice of cheese. It finds cheese. After 2 generations, we take a mouse, put it into the same maze, and the mouse finds a cheese 3 times faster, or even goes in a straight line. Why? As they say, genetic memory and the like. Quite right. In animals, this is passed on, I mean. The simpler, the more precise it is. We take a fungus, no need to go far. We place sugar through a maze. The fungus begins to grow and extend its tentacles until it finds this sugar. Sugar for fungi is something very nutritious, so they always seek it. Then we take a small part of this fungus. It multiplies with mycelium. We grew one part, let it go, and it already goes in a straight line into this maze.
Igor Mikhailovich, but if we, let's say, draw a parallel of this experiment with the spiritual knowledge, with people's experience, then it also turns out that...
Well, here is exactly the opposite. For example, there is a group of people who achieve spiritual development. It would seem that others should also be
faster.
But, excuse me, there is such a concept as the system, and the spiritual development of people is extremely inconvenient for it. Why? It loses its power, it loses its source of food. That's why it begins to plot intrigues against us. In this way, the knowledge that was brought in by so many prophets in the history of humankind was distorted. As well as the last one, let's say, that very Jesus, that very Muhammad, right? That very Buddha. All was distorted. If we look then... By the way, speaking about Buddhism, there is interesting information. Buddhism is a leader among all religions. Why? The knowledge began to be distorted later than in all the rest. It was preserved almost through the entire life of the Buddha, and almost 100 years after him without distortion, almost without distortion. It's an extremely rare case, because with others, distortion began immediately. Furthermore, there is another phenomenon. Buddhism began to be put into written records later than all the rest. Thus here,
they practiced more.
More right. And the third important point, eventually, Buddhism was distorted more than all other religions.
With substitutions.
Well, that's how it is.
Igor Mikhailovich, there are also a lot of questions regarding another topic, the topic of aliens, including questions from subscribers of the Spanish blogger. We had an interview with him, Nacho Roja, and the audience of his YouTube channel, Verdad Oculta, The Hidden Truth. And I, let's say, made a kind of promise to ask and voice some of these questions during our program. May I voice these questions in our today's program? Well, maybe not all of them, because there are many.
Well, if you made a promise to our friends, then you can't back down. Well, let's try.
Great, thank you. So, in one of the programs you said that the Anunnaki come from the planet Nibiru, or Nubiru, which means...
I'll say it again, everywhere is written as Nibiru, and many pronounce Nibiru. There was no such expression, or such a phrase as Nibi. It was Nubi, from that side.
Nubira.
Yes, and Ra was precisely the concept of the sun, well, one God and the sun.
And at that time you said that it is precisely translated as from behind the sun, right? But you also said that it is not the real name of the planet. And the question is the following. What is the real name of this planet?
Shall we tell them? Well, tell them. Come on, it is not a secret.
Vamfim.
I hope you're satisfied.
Is it a native planet of the Anunnaki?
No. It is the closest planet where the Anunnaki live. It is the closest to planet Earth. In general, let's say in addition to Vamfin, the Anunnaki have thousands of planets where the human race, we call it this way, of the Anunnaki lives. Well, again, many call them reptilians, not reptilians, well... It is more correct to call everyone who has a soul and personality humans, after all. whereas the soulless ones is a different matter. Well, again, just like they protect planet Earth, they protect millions of planets, while in fact this race has been existing billions of years already. They forgot and lost where their own planet was, the one they come from. It has been gone a long time ago. For example, like, we Earthlings come from planet Earth. Although this information is not correct, to be honest. There is a lot of evidence of this and the like. No, it is not that aliens created us, because some will begin to say that aliens created us or something else. No. People moved to Earth from another nearby planet. Well, in theory, humanity should already be very highly developed too and be in, let's say, the universal community. There should already be representatives of Earthlings on Meru as of the highly developed race, while we, excuse me, to the present day, remain so, let's say, wild. But aren't we actually wild? Since we still have wars, if we really obey Satan still, then what else can we be called? If we, to present day, exist in a consumer format, in relation to one another, we do not have a creative society. Well, it's already a topic for another day. Sorry.
Thank you. The next question. Are the Anunnaki the same that very deities described in ancient Sumer? Anu, Enki, Enlil, Ninu?
Of course not. Again, what you have just named, the Sumerians described the actual gods who existed 12,000 years ago. Well, more correctly, they were destroyed 12,000 years ago. They had existed a little before that time, well, for a fairly long period of time, and all of them were El's children. Well, you also mentioned El, whereas those ones were his children, whom he appointed gods and gave them peoples. And we, humanity, are precisely the result of genetic modifications, let's say, by those gods. But what does this have to do with the Anunnaki? Those ones were people, the most ordinary people, and for fun, because they were bored of living for a long time. They precisely created nations. They divided people and created nations. Some were created white, others were black. Third ones were yellow. They appointed peoples for themselves and were their gods. And for many, they still remain gods until today. This is true. Well, for those who are interested, there is a video, Atlantis, the elite in search of immortality. We talked about it there, so they can watch. And it is entirely supported by historical evidence. For those who will watch it carefully and will try to find, even today there is a lot of information despite the fact that the Ninth Circle, who are exactly their followers, actually have been destroying it all in every possible way. Well, you can't destroy everything. Truth cannot disappear.
The next question. Will there be contact with aliens?
What does it mean, will be?
Well, they write this way. Will there be contact with aliens?
But it has never interrupted.
Has never interrupted.
It's like, will I be able to talk to you sometime?
Right.
And what are we doing with you now? Or haven't we been talking or what? Or were there times when there was no such contact with aliens? Guys, well, if they mean officially, sort of, that the delegation will fly in, they will we'll sit down, we'll start having tea, talking, and the government will announce to us that, look, friends have arrived from some constellation, from some galaxies. They have come to exchange with us, we give them monkeys, they give us a little dinosaurs. Well, some kind of cultural exchange.
Perhaps they mean a direct contact with them.
Well, yes, maybe people didn't put it right. When asking this question, they had in mind whether they would ever be able to contact them.
Every consciousness worries about itself.
I'm sorry, my friends, we haven't fully understood the question.
So, is it true that they can read the thoughts of others?
Of course they can. If it concerns the Anunnaki, yes, this is not a problem.
Is it true that they can communicate telepathically?
Among themselves, yes, and with those who are also capable of this. But people will not hear them.
Is it true that they can manipulate me to make me see a person differently?
To manipulate this person, to make
See the other person differently.
what for? We've just discussed hypnosis. You can manipulate anyone.
Yes.
I'm sorry, even a dog or a kitten. And what for? What is the point? What is his value of this person?
To be manipulated this way, yes.
Why? I'm sorry, should the representatives of the higher race spend time on this person? What is his value? It's the same as, you know, the aliens have abducted a farmer. They've arrived from God knows where to abduct a farmer, to convey a message to him for all humanity. Well, guys, isn't it insane?
We've already said that there is more than 2% of schizophrenia.
Well, quite right, yes. Well, it's somehow...
Megalomania, yes.
The system jokes to the utmost.
Yes, next question. Rumors are in the air that the Queen of England is a reptilian, and many people in government too, and they control?
No, the representatives of the Ninth Circle, let's put it so, aliens, do not participate in this representation of the Ninth Circle. So I'm sorry, but those who you are asking about are ordinary people.
Do reptilians have relationships with the Illuminati?
Again, it is exactly the same answer.
Yes. Currently, the average life expectancy is 80 years. Do you think it is possible to increase the life expectancy in the future?
The prolongation of life beyond the species limit, let's say within reasonable bounds, is surely possible. We have just mentioned that Variel and the like, after all. Again, with the help of medications, they prolonged their lives and even far beyond 1,000 years, so there is nothing complicated about this. If today's science is literally close, well, and some medications have already been developed and are being tested and give tremendous result in prolonging life. The question is different. What's the point? In our consumer format, in our life, where man is man's wolf and not a friend, what will we prolong it for?
Existence.
What is the point? I understand, I'm sorry, but I'm just saying, I understand when people live in a creative and constructive society where there is no violence, there is no evil, where there is equality, there is humanity, where there is the development of science, but not the invention of a new type of weapon or enslavement of each other. Where there is a way into boundless space. After all, there are basically billions of planets unexplored by people, similar to our planet where life can exist. I understand when humanity settles on other planets, where development takes place, then this is interesting. Well, isn't that so?
Yes.
Then it makes sense to prolong life for a human. It makes sense to use these technologies for something. But why use these technologies so that we exist as animals even longer, and so that we create new gods for ourselves who will live here forever and rule us? Well,
it doesn't make sense, yes.
Well, the answer is yes. The answer is it's possible.
Is that true that reptilians existed before humans?
They're billions of years old. For example, again, as I've already said, the Anunnaki race has actively existed for about 3 billion years. That is, it means as a highly developed, mind you, a highly developed race. This is, in a sense, in the global sense, not in the earthly one, as a highly developed race. To date, there is no race higher than Anunnaki.
Did reptilians use humans as slaves? And do they still use? Do they eat human flesh?
Yes, they used. In the previous program, we exactly said that those who are called the Apexians 24,000 years ago, literally, kept humanity in slavery, and humanity was working for them. There is plenty of evidence, the quarries that were developed, the mines, and everything else, and indeed, humanity was like biological food for them. Well, that's true, but today, of course not. Thanks to the Anunnaki, humanity was freed from their slavery. Thanks to the fact that people turned to the Anunnaki who made, thank God, a decision, they intervened, and those ones left. Well, again, they intervened only in order to protect humanity from external influences, so that no one enslaves us from the outside. But according to all the laws, according to the laws of Meru, they do not have the right to interfere in our lives. They do not have the right to decide who will rule us here, how we will build our lives. We must develop evolutionally. It depends solely on us, what choice we will make, whether we will live or not. They do not have the right to interfere, to change our climatic conditions. They do not have the right to interfere and forbid a nuclear war to us. They do not have such a right, because it is the choice of humankind. Yes, it wasn't a slip of the tongue, and climate changes are also a consequence of our actions. And this cyclicity repeats itself, and it is also worth thinking why it repeats itself, because we are not changing, while we must.
Well, now I already see the questions that you have answered. Is humanity the result of the Anunnakis' experiment? Regarding this, you have told exactly about El, who was appointing races. Are there reptilians in all parts of the planet? And if they are they all connected and united by one purpose? And what is this purpose?
Well, again, why do they call the Anunnaki reptilians? Well, you know, the presence of some genetic abnormalities, right? Or some advantages, or vice versa, flaws, is not a reason to call them reptilians. And again, many are bothered with Jana's blinking. Excuse me, 9 out of 10 cameras do not record or see it. And people are sitting and they don't see it. Is this a reptilian? It's a most ordinary human being. Thus any of us can be called. After all, we are Darwinists. We are materialists. Are we not reptilians? Take a look at how an embryo develops. Don't we go through the reptilian stage?
A reptilian brain.
So, which one of us is a reptilian? Let's better call them the Anunnaki, because for me the reptilians are precisely those who are called
the Apexians.
The Apexians. And in this case, yes, it's a reptiloid form. It is soulless. Well, with high intelligence, they have a unified primary consciousness. It is huge and powerfully developed. Much more than ours, of Earthlings, unfortunately, by many times. That one is a reptilian, because it only devours. It has nothing humane. Whereas a higher, soul-filled race that has achieved tremendous results, and we call them reptilians, it's us who are actually reptilians in comparison to them. Sorry, but this is true.
The next question is, and what is the name of the god of the reptilians, meaning of the Anunnaki? I would like to know who is your god, or who is our god?
God, both theirs and ours and everyone's, is one. All over the world, throughout the world community, God is called Ra. But on such planets as ours, and in such communities as ours, there are also a lot of them, unfortunately, a lot of them. They give various epithets to God. And again, the most ordinary people, children of El, of this world dictator, were also called gods. They were also considered gods. And they were also given these names, and they were worshipped and the like. Well, and God, He is one, and always, from time immemorial. And here on this planet, He was also called Ra.
Is it possible to become a reptilian and possess all their skills and qualities? I wonder what they meant. Maybe...
Well, if they meant to develop to the level of the Anunnaki, it would be desirable for our humanity to reach their level of development. That would be wonderful. And it is not difficult. Every person feels and understands what the world should be like, what he should be like. One just needs to be like this and to merely correspond to this. And there will be everything.
So, Igor Mikhailovich, the next question is addressed to you through our friends, bloggers, by their subscribers, the residents of the Virgin Islands. They would like us to ask you the following question. The matter is that their region has begun to greatly suffer from climate change, which seriously affects business and generally calls to question further habitability of the islands. The question is as follows. Can you change the climate situation so that the increasing climate change, such as earthquakes, hurricanes, and so on, would bypass their islands? They say that they are ready to provide everything that is needed for this in any quantity.
Just wait. If I got this right, there are islands where they live and they suffer greatly from overall climate change. And they are ready to provide everything that is needed in any quantity so that this would bypass them. They would be doing well. And for the rest of the people, everything would remain as it was. Well, I got that right, didn't I? But then again, what, after all, being distributed around the world? Yes, somewhere more, somewhere less, but changes are distributed all over the world. And if you remove this from one point, then aggravation occurs somewhere else. That is, this issue already concerns the world. But, again, they ask a direct question, and I answer honestly. Can we do this? Yes, we can. This is not a problem. But to do that, we need. They say we are ready to provide everything that is needed. And here, however ridiculous it may seem to someone at the first glance, but what is needed is, let's put it so, 2 bundles of hair from the heads of 2 people. Each bundle should have at least 120 hairs, and the hair should not be cut. They should be pulled out by a person himself, and necessarily with the bulbs. This is a must, I'm sorry. And these people should give them wholeheartedly. Hairs cannot be bought. This should not be bought or taken away somehow, or a person shouldn't be forced.
By force.
Yes, there should be no violence at all. This should be done on one's own free will, from the bottom of one's heart, so that people really seek to help you, and they would sacrifice their hair and give it to you. Give us 2 bundles of hair, and we will solve this issue. But there is one condition. It concerns the whole world, as I said. So the hair should be taken from the heads of the 2 most powerful and popular people in the world. It concerns the whole world. And that is why they should be the leaders of this world. It's a must. How can this be otherwise? Meaning, why the leaders? Because we pay attention to them, we listen to them. We know everything about them. We love them or hate them. It doesn't matter, but we put our attention into them. Either love or hatred. They're popular. That's why it's a must. And they solve problems, well, let's say, in their territories, but they are the most popular in the world. There aren't that many popular people in the world, so you'll have to do your best to get those hairs if you want this. However, I think, among those who are well known, well, one of them doesn't have hair at all. It should rather be added there. However, there are ones like Trump and Boris Johnson, right? They will suit for this. Good luck. What's next?
I'm sorry. Now we all will become more serious. Igor Mikhailovich, the next question is, can we learn prescience, meaning predictions of the future?
You can. This is, by and large, not very difficult. The only question is, what do you need it for? Knowing the future is not always good. And anyway, if you are destined to live to the time you want to know about, you will know it anyway over time. While if you are not destined to live to the time you want to know about, then what difference does it make to you? What happens next?
They ask another interesting question. What do the Bulgarian soothsayer Vanga and the cartoon series The Simpsons have in common?
Vanga and the Simpsons, well, I think, is the accuracy of their predictions. Both Vanga and The Simpsons were giving accurate predictions, and with descriptions at that. Well, it is such a question, you know. Let's say, open the internet, it is mentioned almost everywhere. Therefore, guys, well, although there is one point. In this case, and I think those who asked this question did not even suspect, that they have one more thing in common. Where did they get this information from? After all, behind the information what Vanga received, and those who make The Simpsons, I hope you notice this, since you are asking this question, that the picture they draw completely coincides with reality. So it's the Vamphimians who are behind the information in both cases. These people are simply in contact with them, and for them it is not a problem to get a picture from the future. And this is true.
Igor Mikhailovich, there is also such a question. Why does Igor Mikhailovich ask Zhana, how many of you are here? And why does Zhana answer the following, more than you wish, but much fewer than you hope?
Why did I ask this question? Because I was asked to ask her this question. Again, guys, my friend just like you, they asked me. One time, then another and another one, and I could not refuse. Just like Tatiana now, so I had to ask this question. And what is the second part there?
Why does Zhana answer the following? More than you wish, but much fewer than you hope?
Simply because she knows our human essence. That's why she answers this way. That we would like none of them to be here, that we would like to be alone. But on the other hand, we, being very well aware of what our civilization is headed for, we would hope that there are a lot of them, that they would help us, do everything instead of us, solve our issues, and that's why she answered that way. I guess so. Or isn't it so? She agrees that it is so.
There's also the next question. Can you please ask them, if they were to give advice to humanity, what advice would that be?
What advice to give to humanity? Well, you know, all jokes aside, what's the point of this advice? You have nowhere to escape anyway. Therefore, it's better to work on yourselves here, among yourselves.
What awaits the human race in the future?
Everything depends on people. And this is exactly related to the previous question. Everything depends on people. On your choice, friends. How humane you will be, and how actively you will defend the position of humanness. That's what will be.
The next question is from Argentina. Which of the religions is genuine and true?
In what sense?
Which religion of the variety of religions existing today is the most truthful and most genuine?
The most truthful and the most genuine? Well, I'll put it this way. As of today, fundamental religions contain a part of the grains. In all religions, 2 grains out of 27 have been preserved. Note this, therefore, there is truth in them. I would not divide them.
Okay, thank you. What is in Zone 51?
A military base of the United States of America, everyone knows that. Guys, just Google. I understand your question, but that which you is not there.
What level of spirituality can be attained during this life?
In fact, a person, during his lifetime, during this very life, can become a Buddha, and Gautama proved this. He serves as an example for you. And he had several followers who also became Buddhas. Therefore, a person can go beyond 72 dimensions and become a Buddha. This means that he can come to the angelic world with a high rank. Let's say that is why this world is wonderful. Actually, we would touch on this issue. then yes, it's hard. For a person here, I understand, there are a lot of temptations, secondary consciousness is strong, the system and everything. Well, there are a lot of problems, a lot of substitutions. Substitutions in religion divert one far from the truth. There are a lot of worries, a lot of everything. But what can be more beautiful than a thorny path leading to the stars? After all, having overcome this and abandoned this illusion, a person can become worthy among equals. Isn't it worth it? A simple question.
Did civilizations on other planets with the same kind of life died out due to the same mistakes that we are making on Earth now?
Well, not always, but to a greater extent, yes.
Are climatic changes connected with the increase of people on the planet?
Well, climatic changes in this case have cyclicity, so the number of people does affect it, but at the same time it does not. Yes and no, let's put it this way. It affects indirectly, but not directly. Do you know what affects the most? Not an increase in the number of people, but along with our increase in number, there is a decrease in humanness in us. That does affect.
That's what the actual anthropogenic factor is, right?
Absolutely right.
Will the Anunnaki share their advanced technologies with us?
Well, my friend, just imagine to give some advanced technologies to our humanity with our consumer system, with our attitude to each other. Well, what will we do with them? Will we be deciding how to treat incurable diseases? Will we use these technologies to give free electricity to every house? Well, what will we do with them? Or will we use it to create an even larger bludgeon than nuclear weapons so as to hit one another on the head? You yourself give an honest answer, and you will also understand my answer, which I will not voice. You yourself will figure it out.
Why do the Anunnaki, if they want the best for humanity, allow the Illuminati elite to manipulate us?
Wait, well, I have actually answered this question. Well, guys, what do the Anunnaki have to do with our elite and the fact that we allow them to manipulate us? Why should they forbid us anything? They generally have no right to interfere in our lives in any way. Their function is external protection, not more. But our world is our world, and we must make appropriate choices. After all, it is us who endow someone with power. Isn't that so? After all, power does not fall on them from the sky, and God does not appoint anyone from the Illuminati or anyone else to be king, prince, or president. All this is the result of our choice, of our actions, let's say so. We act in this direction, we get what we get. Then why be indignant? If we have chosen this, we like it, let's rejoice and live in such joy. And if we don't like it, we can change something. We have the right to decide, and no one has the right to dictate to us from the outside, neither the Anunnaki nor anyone else. It is our, evolutionary path of development. The development of our entire civilization as a whole, and each person as an individual. Why each person as an individual? Because the whole civilization consists of people as individuals. And if you, my friend, are sitting and listening, keep talking, keep telling us your interesting stories and the like, and then you go and continue serving the Illuminati, then in that case, do not ask such questions. And if you do not want to serve them, act in a different way. After all, the consumer format of the development of the modern community can be easily put on the rails of the creative and constructive one, and to live in peace, in equality and in love, to be worthy of the entire world. Then there will be technologies, there will be everything. Why not? If we become worthy of this.
Do they know anything about the fourth and fifth dimensions?
Who?
The Anunnaki.
Guys, these are naive questions. It's a childish question, you see. When a person develops spiritually, the first stages of his knowledge precisely go through the fourth, the fifth, and the sixth dimensions. When a person reaches the seventh dimension, he gets spiritually liberated already. Well, it has been known from the dawn of time. Therefore, at the level of spiritual development, the person involuntarily goes through at least 6 stages, and in the seventh dimension, he already received freedom and eternal life. And our entire material world, the entire, I emphasize, material world, consists of so-called 72 such dimensions. And a person in his life, during his lifetime, just like the previous question was, can he achieve anything? Yes, he can become absolutely free spiritually and pass through all the 72 dimensions, that is, become a Buddha. Well, I would, in human understanding, Buddha means something, right? Well, I would say compared to earthly values, he's a doctor of sciences. That's who Buddha is, a doctor of spiritual sciences, right? Only in the literal sense, not on paper, but in real life. Why? Because he put a lot of effort, time and attention into his spiritual development. And additionally, he worked to ensure that people around would become spiritual, that is, he served the spiritual world honestly, sincerely and maturely, without playing around, but truly and for real. And this kind of path leads to such enlightenment as Gautama's and other people. So everything is possible.
And the last question. We understand that the Allatra movement is focused on the spiritual contribution into people. And the question is the following. What motivates them to do this?
That's what motivates them to do this, guys. That's what motivates us all. We've gathered here together in our spare time, and we are trying to talk to you. We don't need fame. We don't need your money. We don't need anything from you at all. But we need a different world. We need a world in which we would like to live, from which we will not want to leave, even to the spiritual world, because it should be equal in love, in joy, in that sincere inner happiness, so that to communicate with each other here will be the same as to communicate with an angel there, and so that there will be no difference between those worlds, the world eternal and this world, even though it is material, even though temporary residing here, but angels. And let us together strive towards this, my friends, to make this world similar to the spiritual world, and not the one it is now, and everything depends on us. So let's love each other. Thank you.